The best of the Morning X on 99X. Barnes, Leslie, and Jimmy. The original 99X.
I forgot to tell you guys this story. This just happened over the weekend. One of the most unbelievable... It's a spooky story. It is a spooky story.
Really?
Lisa's sister had a baby. So her sister had a baby. She had to go out to L.A., where her sister lives, to see the baby. Actually, for the bris, okay? The snip-snip.
The snip-snip.
Anyway, so she hasn't been out to L.A. in a long time. And she was kind of, hanging out with some of her family. And a lot of her family who she hadn't seen in a long time. And she was sitting there talking with a couple of her uncles. Her Uncle Steve and her Uncle Paul. And she was telling, so what are you doing in Atlanta? They were asking her, and she said, well, this, and I'm working here, and, who you dating? She said, well, I'm dating this guy. His name is Jimmy. And, they asked, oh, cool, what does he do? And I said, well, he's on the radio. He does a show on the radio in Atlanta. He used to live out here, actually, for a long time. He's pursued an acting career. And her Uncle Steve says, is his name Jimmy Barron?
Uh-oh.
Whoops.
And she's like, yeah. Well, it turns out her Uncle Steve is like this really old, very, very good friend of mine when I lived in L.A. in the 80s.
No way.
I used to be at his house. I was in a poker game. We'd play like almost every Saturday night or every other Saturday night. We'd play cards at his house for like 5 years.
Man, the Jewish circles are small.
And this was her, and not only that, but we would play with her, and this was her dad's brother-in-law, but her other uncle, who was there, Paul, used to also play in the game with us, and her Uncle Paul was her dad's identical twin brother. I don't know if identical, but twin brother. So these two guys, her two uncles, and now, if that's not bizarre enough, because I think it's pretty wild, that I was good friends with two of her uncles back when...
She was, 10?
We figured out she was probably about 15 and I was about 25, because we're 10 years apart, and this was right around the mid-'80s. Here's the thing that is really unbelievable. I didn't know, a whole lot of other Jewish people in L.A. at the time, and I used to probably for about 4 or 5 years, I used to have Passover Seder at Steve's house.
This is like 6 degrees. What?
Guess who used to go to those Seders?
Oh, no. Lisa.
Lisa.
Little 10-year-old Lisa.
Do you remember her?
Have no recollection, because they were like big family gatherings.
You got pictures of any of
like
these?
30 or 40 people. And what do I know? She's like, some 15-year-old kid.
That is strange.
How bizarre is that?
Somebody's got to have a picture somewhere of one of.
I would think.
You know what?
A
I
group
would
photo
think so.
or a family photo.
And it's kind of a wild story. Just like, remember that woman who called us like years ago? Who she was married to a guy, and they went back to her in-laws' house, for some holiday, and they were looking through all their childhood pictures of her husband's family, and the husband's family took out some pictures from a trip to Disneyland they had when the husband was like 8 or 9.
Oh, right, and she was in it.
The wife was also 8 or 9 in the background because her family happened to be vacationing at Disneyland that exact same weekend.
That is spooky.
That is pretty
wild.
wild.
So we were at the same event. Well, 85. What? 15?
How many years in a row?
Well, I don't really know. I'm estimating that it was early to mid 80s, and I was probably there maybe 3 or 4 years that I had gone to his house for the Seder, and the Passover Seder is, you have the whole family over. It's not unusual to have like 30, 40 people over. You have people standing or sitting and eating, sometimes on their knees on a stairway if there's no room. It's a big thing. So there are a lot of people, and it's a huge table. You don't see everybody. You don't pay attention to every single person at the table. And she and I were at the same dinner table, probably a couple of years.
That is spooky.
back years and years ago.
That's cool.
That's the ultimate 6 degrees of Jimmy Barron right there.
It is.
That's the
Just-
circle.
and that I used to play cards with her father's twin brother.
Unbelievable.
Her father died when she was little, and I don't know him, but how unbelievable is that?
I bet that happens, though. People hear stories like that all the time.
I don't know. It can't happen too often. Anything like that ever happen to you?
No.
Never happened to me.
Not that I know of, at least.
Yeah.
No. Wild story.
That's a great story.
Wild story.
Okay, we're back. This is talk time, and we're ready for caller number 1. Go ahead, caller number 1. Go ahead, caller number 1.
I think the guy died, Joe.
You're on the air.
Hey, Greg.
Hey.
Hey, what's your story?
Many years ago I used to live in Denver, and
There's more to this story you don't want to miss, and it resumes right after this brief break. This is the best of the Morning X on 99X.